I was born in Miami, Florida, and grew up there. And I had a minister, or my minister, who was saying, "Where are you going to go to college?" And I said I wasn't really sure. And he says, "I'd like you to look at Stetson." Anyway, I came and really fell in love with Stetson as soon as I got on campus. And then I did my undergraduate work at Stetson. Was really fortunate that they had a scholarship that was, if you were going into the ministry, they would give you you'd get a scholarship for, and all you had to do, and it paid for your education. And the only thing you had to do was to serve in churches for like 4 years, and that paid it back. And so I wouldn't have been able to afford to have gone to Stetson or to even almost any university at that time. When my father died, which was just a few years ago, and I was sitting with him in a bar, and we were talking, and he was just reminiscing about my mother, saying, I'd give anything for it to be 1955 and still living in Miami. And he says, your mother, you going to school was so important for your mother. I didn't have any money at the time. It was a downtime with his business. And but she would stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out grants and those sort of things to be able to get me to come to Stetson. And I never realized all the work that she did to make sure that her children went to college first, and then also to a school that was had a reputation for that. And I fell in love with the university and my experiences here. In terms of my major, which was kind of religious, what we would say religious studies or whatever, but it was a time in which a lot of, there were challenges. Professors would challenge the students to think beyond what they would know. And I can remember some good old boys that were going to be preachers, and that's why they were there, and how that they were challenged as actually very much like our professors today here, challenged with asking questions, introducing us to philosophy, introducing us to things that stretched our own faith, and also would say, don't be afraid of questions. And your religious affiliation or interest doesn't contrast with those opportunities to see more. But I think some of the things that were the most fun to remember, or were some of the antics that we had, of course, during the 70s, where we had streaking, which I don't know if you know what that is, but streaking was something that we all will talk about when we get together. And I'll never forget when Anita Bryant came to speak, and the students were really more progressive and weren't real thrilled about her even being there. And I remember her streaking her concert, and and actually the dean had set up a formalized streak so that we could have Uh, Everyone do it. That was an event that, in the 70s, and streaking and have a student-wide streak was a fun thing for people, and really was a time. It was a real kind of reflection of the 70s of that time. The seriousness of issues like civil rights, but also the war, because it's at the end of the, I was there in the late 70s, so it was towards whereas we were literally ending the war, and Watergate was happening at that time. And so to sit around with students and be a part of that was tremendous. Yeah, immediately after graduating, I went to seminary and was there for the 4 years. A lot of students who were going into the ministry or whatever would go from here, because you could go to Southern Seminary. But later on, people like Candy Queen Sutherland, who's here, Dixon Sutherland, very progressive, bright students, also came from that. I went from there to pastoring churches, and I then went through a period I had left pastoring churches, and I had a company that actually worked with funeral homes. I'd always had an interest in funerals and funeral homes, and so I had a very large corporation that worked with, did the marketing for funeral homes, and that was, and then I got to a point that I was on the board of trustees, and I can remember one day we were talking, and I said, have you gotten someone to be the chaplain? Because, yeah, we really haven't. We thought about getting a retired minister or something like that. He says, I said, that seems like it'd be a wonderful thing to be able to do. He said, would you be interested in doing that? I said, well, I can't do it full time because I have a company that I have to run, but yeah, I'd be really interested. And that's how I became a chaplain here. And that was an opportunity to not to be a preacher, although that we would include that, but I was the opportunity to do some things that were interfaith oriented, a progressiveness, and it wouldn't have been that way when I was a student. It was more conservative in terms of it was almost sectarian in that way. And yet it became, later when I became chaplain, we were going through some paperwork today of letters and stuff that I have, and awards and things like that from students, or gifts saying, thank you for starting the Jewish student organization, working with some of the other groups that never were represented at Stetson, the Catholic Student Organization. We did things, I remember, when I was a student, we never would have had much to do. There was always a tension between Baptists and Catholics, and when I got here as a chaplain, they said, the priest said, would it be okay for us to have an Ash Wednesday, the distribution of ashes? and we'll just take somewhere on campus. I said, that chapel is yours. In other words, you're welcome to use that whole thing, which you never would have had. I very often I would get a phone call from some preacher that, was pompous and pious and was upset at Stetson because of it. And I would write that person back and everything, and I'd say, Dr. Lee, let me, first of all, I'm going to call it. I never want you to get caught off guard. But I've gotten some calls and things like that. He says, Michael, you're going to get calls. He says, that's why I like you. And I said, well, that you don't hear very often from a university president. And he was wonderful in bringing social activism and things like that to the university. So, and especially working with African American students and leaders, and he brought the first African American dean to Stetson, and that was important to him, and he set such an example for us. And so those are the times in which you say, Stetson's good people, and have been led by some of the best people. Yeah, I loved the DeLand community, which was, but also loving just the overall community and being able to help our very often students with in ways they wouldn't have been able to be helped before, that we didn't just throw them away. And I can remember my doctor coming out and saying, Mike, it doesn't look good. First of all, you're not getting the transplant because you're not going to qualify health-wise. And he says, and the other thing is that you need to start thinking about it. And I never forget, he says, of the things, if there's anything you want to do, you probably ought to do it as soon as possible. And and he said, your situation is just very serious. And I remember looking at him and I was saying, Doc, there is nothing more that I would want to do. I said, I am so fortunate to, first of all, be the chaplain of a university and work with a university that changed my life. And I said, the other is that I live in a community that has embraced me and the things that I've been able to be a part of. The other is my family and my children and their sense of humor. They know who I am to them. And so I said, Doc, there's nothing more that I have to be fulfilled. I said, I'm fortunate because not many people end their life by saying, yep, I'm a complete whole person. But I have, and that was important to me. I said that I've just been fortunate enough to be surrounded by people I respect, to be at a university that has been so good to my family, and I hope we have been back. But to say, at the end of the day, it's been a good trip. And it's those sort of things that have made all the difference. The Nietzsche juice, the Buddhism, all those things. I said, I discovered a lot about myself during that time, and it's serious, but it wasn't. I was still able to laugh and bring that laughter to others, hopefully, at that time. So it's been a good ride.